Okay, thank you everyone for joining us. We are going to go ahead and get things underway. Again, I'm Laura Ladd from Mosaic Consulting Group, and we are delighted to have everybody with us today. Welcome to our year-end webinar. We appreciate you joining us. As many of you know, year-end is a very complex process with a lot of moving pieces and one of the busiest times of year for your finance, HR, and payroll teams. We've worked with clients across the spectrum to make this process seamless, and we have some best practices from our experience that we are excited to share with you today. Our presenter is Amy Morgan, Premier Support Consultant, and Amy has 2 decades of HR and payroll experience with corporations of all sizes. She's an expert in the areas of UTA, UTM, payroll, tax reconciliations and adjustments, open enrollment and life events, and mass imports. She works with her clients on a variety of projects throughout the year, but her payroll experience gives her added insight into events such as year-end, open enrollment, ACA reporting, and BI reporting. So you guys are in very good hands today. Today we're going to cover the 5 keys to unlocking year-end from preparation to execution. Before we get underway, I just want to go over a few housekeeping notes. We are always asked the question, will we get a link to the webinar and will we get a copy of the presentation? Yes, you will. We will send that to you at the conclusion of the webinar today, along with a copy of the presentation and a link to our year-end blog. We will also include time for your questions at the end, but if at any time during the presentation you have a question, you can ping me using the chat box at the bottom center of the screen. That's the icon that looks like a conversation bubble. You can type in your question and I will pause and make sure that we address it for you. And now I will turn things over to Amy.
Thank you, Laura. Good afternoon, everybody, or good morning, depending on which side of the continental divide you happen to be sitting on right now. It is that time of year. It is time to prepare for year end. We do this every year, and somehow it never gets any more fun. But without further ado, here are the keys to unlocking a successful year end. Key number 1, make sure your system is set up for 2019. No, I am not reading last year's script. Trust me. This is your last chance to make sure everything you have is set up properly for 2019. So you're going to check, you're going to double check, and if you've got enough sets of eyeballs lying around, you're going to triple check to avoid problems when it comes time to push the button and start printing W-2s in January. So the first thing you want to do, you want to make sure that every location that had payroll in 2019 has an active tax ID, federal, state, local, unemployment. Not only that they have an active tax ID, but that ID is in UltiPro. If you use UltiPro's payment services, you want to make sure they have the information. Honestly, they should, unless it's a very recent acquisition. But you do want to double check with them, especially if you had an acquisition. So you've got stuff that was paid in 2019, but not through UltiPro. If you use a third party, obviously you want to make sure they have the information. And if you do taxes in-house, there's a good chance that your tax people have it, but hey, double check, always safe. The next thing you want to do is you want to make sure that every employee who was paid in 2019 has a valid Social Security number. The easiest way to do it is you just run a quick BI report, the employee name, the employee number, Social Security number, and I just run through the list and make sure it looks good. There are some red flags to look for. Social Security numbers do not start with the number 9. There are taxpayer ID numbers that begin with a 9, so it is possible for somebody to be getting payments in the U.S. and they have a number 9, but they would not be employees with wages. So you shouldn't be seeing 9s. Second one, Social Security numbers do not begin with 666. You may think Satan is working for you, but he's not. So you're good to go there. And the third is, you know how a Social Security number is 3 digits, 2 digits, 4 digits, right? At no time will one of those groups of numbers be all zeros. So I used to do just a quick scan for all zeros in one of those places. UltiPro will not let you have duplicate Social Security numbers in the system for different people, so you're good there. So the next thing you want to do is you want to check everyone's W-4 for the year. I'm not saying you're going to sit down with a stack of 2,000 forms and start reading through them. You can run a report out of BI that will tell you if an employee is marked as blocked or exempt for taxes. Blocked means that the employee marked exempt on their W-4 form. Wages are reported to the IRS, taxes are not taken out. It's perfectly normal. But if an employee has this, the employee needs to submit a new W-4 form by February 15th of 2020 in order to keep the exemption. So I used to just run that list, keep them there, and mark them off as they submitted new W-4s. If they are exempt, it means that neither wages are being reported nor are taxes being withheld. Yes, this is legitimate if you have employees here on certain visas. Your average normal employee is not going to have this. You shouldn't have this marked for anybody. This is actually something I would check for every month, but an end of year check is a good thing to have. The last thing you want to check are your employees with lock-in letters. A lock-in letter is when the IRS says employee Bob is single and zero, period. He can't change it. So I used to keep those lock-in letters in my year-end binder, and at the end of the year I'd go through, I'd make sure the employee was still locked in, make sure that the letter was still valid, so we could be good there. The last step for this key only applies if you either did your implementation in 2019 or if you had acquisitions during the year. If you brought in opening balances from another system for 2019, it is possible that you have an employee with earnings, but that employee does not have a default or a primary location assigned. So you want to run a quick report and make sure all employees who are going to get a W-2 have a primary location assigned. This is mostly going to be an issue with an employee who was on the opening balances, but was not actually paid through UltiPro once you went live. You would typically hit a show-stopping error if you tried to pay someone without a location. So, key number 2, plan for printing. So much fun. So if you're going to ask UltiPro to print your W-2s for you, then you sign up now. You go to the customer support portal, then go to support, in-house printing and print services, year-end printing, click the register now button, follow the steps. It's pretty straightforward. They're going to ask you how many W-2s you're going to print. It does not have to be an exact number, but it should be a really close guess. Not to be overly self-promoting, but Mosaic also prints W-2s. If you would like us to give you a quote, just reach out to your friendly neighborhood Mosaician. And by that, I mean whoever you're working with at Mosaic, whether it's a consultant, someone on the sales team, a person you sit next to on the bus in the morning, whatever. We're all friendly. Reach out to your friendly neighborhood Mosaic employee, and we will get you in contact with the correct people. If, however, you prefer the excitement of printing the forms yourselves, then now is the time to order your supplies. You want to order enough forms to print one for every employee who did not opt out of a printed form, and that should include all of your terminations. You want some extras for overflows, for paper jams, and trust me, I guarantee you're going to run out of toner, so you want some extras for when you notice that the pages are now gray instead of black. The forms are dated, unfortunately, so whatever you don't use this year has no use outside of paper airplane competitions, but those can be really fun if you've got a big open space in your office. But you know, You also do not want to forget the envelopes. The good news is that the envelopes can be reused. The envelopes they sell now are identical to the ones I used the very first time I printed W-2s on a laser printer, not an inkjet. So if you get too many, just put them in a file cabinet till next year, you're good to go. Okay, in case you're wondering, how do you determine how many forms you need? Well, it's actually pretty easy. You can generate your year-end tables, and that will tell you after you run the let me start the sentence over. Generate your year-end tables and then run the W-2 summary report. That will give you a count of W-2s, which is every employee who's been paid out of the company. If I got paid out of 2 companies, I'm getting 2 W-2s. That's the number you need for UltiPro, and if you're a company that prints all W-2s, that's the number you're going to need, plus some overage. In addition, there are some SQL scripts that can be run. So once again, your friendly neighborhood Mosaic consultant, or you can open a ticket with UltiPro, and they can tell you how many terminated employees are getting paid for W-2s, how many overflow pages there are. So if I worked in 5 different states this year, that's more state and local taxes than can print on a W-2. So I'm going to get 3 or 4 pages just to get all of the local taxes.
Hey,
so
Amy.
there's a SQL script that can do that.
Hey, Amy, Laura here. Can I jump in with a question? A little more context around when you're determining your quantities, you've addressed this a little bit, but do you have a number in your head or a percentage of overage? I know you've kind of talked around this a little bit, but if you had to recommend kind of a formula for folks.
So W-2s are sold in packs of 50. Keeping that in mind. If your employees are pretty stationary, they don't move around a lot, you don't have employees moving between Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Kentucky, which is our big local state taxes, local tax states, I would say 50 for every 500 forms. Definitely have at least 1 extra pack.
Okay, great. And if I can ask you to pause here really quickly, we've had a couple questions come in.
Okay.
If Ultimate has always printed your W-2s, do you still have to sign up?
Yes. Every year.
Okay. Our second question is if you could provide instructions again, where to go to sign up for UltiPro W-2 printing.
Certainly. It is on the customer support portal. And then you go to support, in-house printing and print services, and then year-end printing. And there is a big green button that says register now. You can also go to the customer support portal and do what I did. Type in W-2 printing in the search box.
Awesome. Thank you, Amy.
Okay.
And while we're talking about printing, since Halloween is just around the corner, do you have any horror stories or scary things to tell us about that might have happened in your recent past or distant past regarding W-2 printing?
So I don't know how much of a horror story it is, but 2008 January, like the 27th, 28th, it was the end of the month. It was our first year end on UltiPro. My first year end with this company, they had gone through, we not only did the implementation, we had 4 acquisitions that year between the ones that happened right before we went live and right after we went live. There was craziness. We were very proud of ourselves. W-2s were printed, W-2s were mailed. All terminated employees got a W-2. It was fabulous. Then my boss walked into the office, followed by the CEO. The CEO wanted to know where his W-2 was. And I said, oh, well, come over here. They're available online. Let me show you how to get to it. No. I want a printed W-2. Okay, not a problem. I'll just push this button and it'll print on that printer right over there for you. Well, why wasn't it printed to begin with? Well, because we only printed for terminated employees. Everybody else can get it online where it's been for 2 weeks. You could started your taxes 2 weeks ago. It was great. It's fabulous. It's up to date. It's cool. I want printed W-2s. Okay. I want printed W-2s for everybody in the company. And then you need to mail them. The deadline's January 31st. Can you do that? Now, I've been accused of many things, but being stupid is not usually one of them. When the CEO of the company says, I want everybody's W-2 printed and I want them mailed by January 31st, your response is, yes, sir. Let me get right on that. So I did. I had to use the W-2 I had gotten from my previous employer, who still printed and mailed them to me already. I had to white out all of my information. I had to make something like 1,500 copies, front and back, of that form. And then I had to run them through the printer because the print file, at the time, the print file I got from UltiPro was just the data. I needed the form with the lines in order to get the W-2s. So we got to reprint all of them because I had no way to separate people who'd already been printed. We printed close to 1,500 forms. We folded them. We stuffed them in envelopes. We ran them through the postage meter. The AP department hated us because they had to fill the postage meter 4 times. And I dropped them off at the post office on my way home late on January 31st, but they got done. We learned the lesson, and from that year on, everybody got a printed W-2. Everybody. And that's my horror story.
That is scary, but you're right. That the only acceptable answer when the CEO says, can you do this, is yes, we can. Thanks, Amy.
Yep. Okay. So, key 3. There we go. Key 3, start validating everything. So, if you have been doing your tax reconciliations after every payroll, good for you. You should be. You still want to rerun them for each quarter and then 4th quarter to date. I'm assuming you're doing this 4th quarter, not 1st quarter next year. If you have not been doing your tax recons, first off, you want to start. They're very useful. They're great for making sure everything's as close to good as you can get. It's also easier to do a tax recon when you remember what you did on payroll last week, because I can guarantee I don't remember what I did on payroll in January. So you're going to run your tax recons. You're going to make note of corrections that need to be made. Bob moved from Ohio to Kentucky, and we didn't update his taxes. So now we have to do some adjustments to get his taxes moved. My major points of concern at this point in the year tend to be FICA, making sure Social Security and Medicare taxes aren't off by more than a couple of pennies, or if they're off on one check, that amount is offset on the next check. Because those tend to be problems. And since it normally fixes itself, that may be a bigger problem than just something weird happened. The next thing you're going to do is you're going to generate your year-end tables. Even if you already did it, generate them again. It does not hurt to keep generating them. You're going to run the W-2 summary, and you're going to print the wage summary report. The numbers should match. They pull from the same tables, so they should match. But if they don't, then you've got an issue and you need to dig down and try to figure out what the problem is. There's a payroll balancing worksheet that you can use to double check your numbers. You can do that on a quarterly basis. If you're not doing it after every payroll, you can do it for 1st quarter, 2nd quarter, 3rd quarter, 4th quarter to date. If you don't have a copy of the payroll balancing worksheet, I believe you can pull it from customer support or reach out to your friendly neighborhood Mosaic consultant and we'll get you a copy. And if the person you're speaking to doesn't know how to use the payroll balancing worksheet, we know a whole bunch of people who do, and we can put you in contact. Not a problem. The last tool you have here is your team. It's your payroll team. It's probably some people in HR, possibly some accounting, finance people. Basically, think back on 2019. What are the weird things that happened? Bob got an extra check. Okay, did we void the check? Did we handle that properly in the system? Can we double check to make sure it's correct? Joe was overpaid. Did he pay us back? Was that processed through the system correctly? So his W-2 was going to be correct. If you had to do adjustments, reversals and adjustments during the year, were they all posted? Did they all tie to the penny like they were supposed to? Also, think about those weird taxes or those weird payments that come in at the end of the year. Taxable fringe benefits and relocation and tuition reimbursements and special bonuses for the person with the best Christmas decorations or whatever. If you had to do them last year, odds are you have to do them this year. So you want to create a supplemental payroll dated the last day of the year, which 12/31 is a Thursday, so you can do it 12/31. You want to collect all of that data. You want to go to HR, you want to go to finance and to accounting and whatever other departments generate this stuff and say, okay, I need these numbers no later than December 24th. Yes, get them early so you can get them checked, entered, and posted. The last one I tend to do, and it's just because I'm like this, if I'm using the same code, oh, no, that's in the fourth key, never mind. I'll cover that in the fourth key.
Let me jump in, Amy. Oh, yeah. Sorry, before we move on. So you've talked about tax reconciliation, your team's memory, the payroll balancing worksheet. Any places that you haven't mentioned already that people can look for red flags?
So there are a couple of them, especially if you have multiple component companies and employees move from one to the other. You want to make sure that they did not get, so people did not go over the limits for 401k, HSA, FSA. You want to make sure you can set your systems so that year-to-date wages when I transfer from company A to company B are recognized as far as my Social Security cap. Not that I make that much, but if I did, normally when you move to a new company, you start over again at zero, and if you've overpaid Social Security, then you get it back on your tax refund. But we can check now and make sure that hasn't happened. You want to make sure if somebody's at or over $200,000, they're getting that extra Medicare taken out of their check. It's 0.9%. Taxes, you want to make sure your state and local taxes are lining up with where the employee lives and or works. I think those are the only ones I hadn't touched yet.
Great. We do have another question, if I can jump in before we move on. One of our folks said, if we sign up for print services, will UltiPro mail paper W-2s to those who have elected to receive online W-2s, or will they only mail them to terminated associates and those who have elected not to receive an electronic copy?
Right. So typical setup in the system is terminated employees get flipped to a paper W-2. And then employees actually have to opt out of a paper W-2. So we always used to do a big push starting about now for employees to go out and opt out of that paper W-2. Get the electronic one, which is usually available sooner. UltiPro can tell you how many people and who they are on the list of who's going to get a paper W-2. I actually think one of the SQL scripts they can run will tell you who's getting a paper W-2. Those are the ones that will get a paper W-2. If I've already opted out of paper, then UltiPro Print Services will not print one. Does that make sense?
It does to me. I think we're good if you want to move on.
Okay. I think we're ready for key 4. Key 4, prepare your system for 2020. Yeah, okay, this one makes sense now. Getting ready for 2020. So there's a lot of stuff that gets updated automatically when you open your first payroll for 2020. The new 401k limits are updated. The new HSA, FSA limits are updated. The tax tables are updated, assuming that the government has set the new tax tables. But all of that stuff happens automatically when you open that first payroll of 2020. But there's stuff you need to do before that first payroll is open that you need to do because UltiPro will not do it automatically. The first thing you need to do is update the company holidays table in Core. The main purpose of this table is to tell UltiPro, hey, this payday is on a bank holiday. We can't pay that day. We need to pay the day before or the day after. You set those rules. So for instance, Christmas falls on a Friday. Christmas is a bank holiday. So if you set that company holiday up ahead of time, then this payroll, when you extend your payroll calendar, that 12/25 payroll will automatically pop to 12/24 or 12/26, depending on how your system's set up. If you pay weekly or biweekly on Friday, Christmas and New Year's 2021 are the only holidays you have to worry about. I think those are the only Friday holidays, bank holidays in 2020. If you pay 1st and 15th or 15th and last, you've got to do a little more work because you're shifting based on what day that is. So you're going to update your holiday table. Once again, it's the bank holidays that matter. If you're not sure, just put them all in. You can Google them. The next thing you want to do is you're going to extend your payroll calendar. And basically what the system does is it says this is the last payroll in 2019. So using that logic, here's the 2020 calendar. You've put your holidays in so it knows what days to skip or what days to move. That has to be done before you open your first payroll in 2020. You literally cannot open that first payroll in 2020 till you've extended the calendars. So if you know that you're not changing your pay frequency or your pay schedule for next year, you can go ahead and do that now. You don't want to do it too early in the year, but now's a good time to do it. The next thing you want to do is publish your internal payroll calendar. What is that, you say? Well, this is something I've always done and something I recommend. It's a calendar for 2020 that has clearly posted, this is payday. This is the day we're posting payroll, so we can't make any changes after this day. This is the day we're pulling time out of the timekeeping system. So this is your last day to get timesheets updated. Ours used to also not only have regular payroll, but we would run a supplemental payroll every month for bonuses and commissions and stuff like that. So that was also posted with the deadline for getting those changes into payroll.
Hey, Amy.
It's used to, yes.
I try to jump in when you take a breath and I never quite make it right. One quick question while we're on this subject. Can you repeat the best time to make all these changes in web, meaning the calendar changes?
So you can go ahead now and put the holiday calendars in. And it's almost November, so now is a perfectly good time to extend your payroll calendar. So anytime in the fourth quarter, if you know you're not making changes for 2020, like you're shifting your payday or something like that, now's the time to do it.
All right, thank you.
Okay. So one last thing about the internal payroll calendar, and your company may or may not have this issue, but when I was doing payroll, if a bank holiday fell during the week, sometimes that meant we posted early, which means all of our deadlines shifted up. So we'd have to make sure people knew that. Also, if Monday was a holiday, we used to make people understand it's nice that Monday's a holiday. We still have to post payroll on Tuesday, so you still have to have your timesheets done on Monday. So that was a good thing to have. It didn't stop the complaining, but at least I could point to the calendar that was sent out to everybody and get that taken care of. And I did just see this question pop up. We actually, it was an Excel spreadsheet. I'd go out and I'd find the template for the next year, pretty colors copied from the previous year. And I would just email it to all managers and had HR link to it on the UltiPro homepage. That's how we would get it out to everybody. We'd also do notices to everybody. Hey, don't forget, you know, Memorial Day is Monday. It's a company holiday. Payroll's still working. So make sure your timesheets are done.
Thank you.
Now, before I forget, before I forget, 2020 is a leap year. What does this mean? Well, some people are going to have their first birthday in 4 years. Also, if you pay weekly, you are going to have 53 pays in 2020. If you pay biweekly, there is a 50-50 chance that you will have 27 pays in 2020. Especially if Friday is your payday, because as I mentioned, New Year's Day 2021 is a Friday, which means everybody's payroll is going to post to Thursday, 12/31/2020. There's your extra payroll in the year. If your first pay of the year is on January 3rd and you're biweekly, you will have 27 pays. There are a couple of different ways to handle that, both from a deduction standpoint, and on an actual earnings standpoint for your salaried employees. UltiPro sent out a newswire a couple of weeks ago about that, saying, hey, this is what's coming. Here's a couple of ways you can handle this. If you didn't see that, and they send enough of them, once again, friendly neighborhood Mosaic peep, we can send you a copy of it. Also be on the lookout, our lovely communications team will be sending out proposed language communications to your employees saying, this is what we're doing because of the extra pay. So you don't have to try to come up with something entirely yourself. We can tell you how to do it. I believe that's going to be posted on our LinkedIn and Facebook pages. We might also have communications about that, but if you don't see it in the next week or two, and they'll stop me if I'm promising it too early, once again, you're going to be surprised to hear I'm going to recommend your friendly neighborhood Mosaic consultant. We can track that down for you. So, and we can also tell you how to handle the deductions and the best way to handle these things. So,
Amy,
reach out. This is what we're doing. Yes.
Since you called us out, I will tag on to that. We will be posting some tips for folks on social media, so do stay tuned. More to come. And while I have the floor, we had another question come in that I wanted to bring up to you. Someone has asked, where do I go to turn on the message for electronic W-2s for employees to opt in?
That is a really good question because they've moved it. It is under system administration, I believe.
Okay.
Remind me, Laura. I will find out and get that to you, and maybe you can send that out when we send everything else out. Will do. Okay. Unless somebody pops in and gives the answer. I know I've got coworkers on here, and so at least one of them's got to know. The last thing I'm going to suggest is making changes. So you've got a clean slate. I've had clients that they have an earning code or a deduction code that's not set up right, or the code itself is a little, shall we say, unfortunate in the way it was abbreviated, and they want to fix it, but they don't want to end up with like 2 PTO codes on the timesheet or 2 medical deductions on the not the timesheet, on the check stub. So that if there's any history, it's going to show up on the check stub. So 2020 is giving you a clean slate. Now's the time to go in and fix the stuff that's calculating wrong, fix the stuff that's taxing wrong. Get rid of, meaning inactivate and hide, earning and deduction codes that you shouldn't be using anymore. One thing I used to do is if I had to use a miscellaneous deduction or earning code for the same thing 3 or more times in a year, it needed a new code. Just so much easier. So I would make sure those got set up and mapped to the GL and all of that fun stuff. So, you know, now's a good time. Look at what you've got. How would you like to clean it up? And let's look at getting that cleaned up. And I am seeing that somebody has already posted how to turn on the W-2 consent. So, Laura, that looks correct. We can send that out if they didn't see it.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
Ooh. Okay, we ready? 5th key, last key, most important key. All right, waiting for my screen to change.
Actually, guys, sorry, there's one more question that came in.
Okay.
We have United Way deductions that begin on 1/1. Can we preload those with effective dates?
Yes.
And
just put in a deduction start date of whenever's in that payroll.
And one more, are we able to print the PowerPoint guide you're using from the Zoom meeting? Oh, I can actually answer that. We're going to be sending out an email where you can see the PowerPoint presentation and some notes from the webinar. So I'll be posting that link to everyone here in a sec, and you'll also get an email. But thanks for that question.
Okay, they just want my picture so they can draw mustaches on it.
Probably.
Probably, yeah. Okay. 5th key, key number 5. This is the most important key. Relax. You got this. Year end can be a nightmare. There's a ton of stuff to do, especially if you're a payroll person, and you know, month end and quarter end is kind of like, yeah, whatever, it's done. It took me an extra 5 minutes to do payroll this week. But we have plenty of time to get this done. We've got 2 months is more than enough. If you get stuck, if you get confused, if all you want to do is vent about somebody stole the last bagel out of the break room and you were counting on that for your lunch today, call your friendly neighborhood Mosaic consultant. We will get you unstuck. We will get you unconfused. And we will sympathize with you on the bagel, because my daughter ate my last bagel yesterday before I could have one. I was very hungry. It was terrible.
Amy?
Yes?
I have a question, not about bagels.
Oh, good.
Can we have a copy of your internal calendar?
Ooh. Let me see if I have one, because I've not done payroll for a few years. But if I don't have one, I can dummy one up. That's, Laura, that's going to be another remind me.
Okay, adding it to the list.
Yes, if I have it, it's at home, so I can have it available by Friday. And then we can send it out again, or let people know where it is.
Got it.
If that works. Okay. So UltiPro has a handy dandy little checklist, and I didn't cover it on this because I covered it on 2 of my last year-end seminars. They have a checklist that says this is what you do. And it's great because a lot of it is just like click the link and it takes you to the report you need. So it's so much nicer than the old ones, which were printed spreadsheets that you had to go and you had to find everything. So the checklist is fabulous, especially if you use Ulti Payment Services, because it's literally click the box and it's taken care of. If you don't use Ulti Payment Services, then clicking the box doesn't necessarily take care of it, but it tells you what to do next. If you're using a third party for taxes, I'm sure that they have a good process to help you through year end as well. Rely on them. So what are we going to do when we get off this call? You're going to go get a cup of coffee, see if there's a bagel left in the break room. Then reach out to everyone who's got a part to play in year end, the finance team, the HR team, your payroll team, and say, hey, year end's coming. This is what I'm going to need from you. It's a very high overview. I'll get you details when we get closer. but this is what we're going to need from you. Make sure your HRIS manager, system admin turns on that W-2 opt-out button, because you really want people to opt out of paper W-2s. Another thing I found that helps is a year-end calendar, which is literally just something I kept on a calendar my insurance company sent me. And I just listed who was on PTO when, and whether it was what I called real PTO or not real PTO. Is it a mental health day where if I have an emergency question, I can call you? Or are you on a cruise ship in the middle of the Bahamas, in which case I'm out of luck? So you know who's going to be where, when, and you can plan accordingly. And, you know, just start picking everybody's brains. You know, what went well last year? What was horrible last year so we can avoid it happening again this year? Start that conversation now so they're thinking about it. So maybe they'll come in a couple of weeks and go, oh yeah, don't forget Bob. So that's it.
Awesome. Thank you, Amy. Now we will open it up to your questions. If you didn't get a chance to ask what was on your mind earlier, now's your chance. And after we take any remaining questions, don't run away, because we have one more takeaway for you from Amy. Amy, we have one. How do you publish the payroll calendar?
It's an internal document, so I would email it to people and have my HRIS manager would link to it on the UltiPro homepage. If you have an intranet that you can use, that would be a good place to put it too.
I think we are good. All quiet. Okay. You all will notice that Ceci has put the link to our blog, and later on we will send you a link to the slides as well. And I'm going to give it back to you, Amy, so you can tell us one last little story.
Okay, so lest we think that year end is always horrible, it's not. And this actually takes place at the same company as my horror story, but different manager. It was my last year end with the company. And our controller comes running into my office. He's like, Amy, why aren't you busy? It was 29th of January, the end of January. I'm like, what do you mean? Payroll's posted. What do you want me to be doing? I'm having lunch. W-2s, why aren't the W-2s out? Why isn't this done? Why isn't that done? Why isn't the other? He, apparently his previous employer, the entire payroll department went into an absolute tizzy for the month of January and didn't really settle down until the first week of February with everything they had to do. So he had assumed that I was just sitting on my butt doing nothing all month. And I guess he thought I would pull the miracle of year end out of a hat on January 31st. And I just looked at him like, we've been done for 2 weeks. Forms are posted. We mailed out the W-2s last week. You may have remembered I spent an hour standing in front of the postage meter. I was not sending out Christmas cards. We're done. Everything's done. Everything's good. No problems. He, of course, had moved and not told anybody, so we had to reprint his W-2 for him. But, yeah, I mean, you do this often enough, it gets pretty easy. It's still stressful because you still have people who do things wrong. But you know that you'll get through it. It's like middle school. There's an end to it. You'll get through it. That's my story. I'm sticking to it.
Very good. Thank you, Amy. And thanks everyone who joined us today. As I mentioned earlier, we'll send out a copy of the recorded webinar and this presentation with a link to our blog on the same topic. So keep an eye peeled for that. And if you have friends and colleagues at work who you think would be interested in learning more and they weren't able to join us today, feel free to share this with them too. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.
Bye, everybody.